Hey everybody, welcome back. We are here again for our weekly live stream. I'm with Ned and Kelly Vandiver, who are coaches on my team. And as always, we are tackling another important topic in the world of relationships and marriage. And today I'm really excited because we're talking about blame and how to end the blame game. This is personally one of my all-time favorite topics. That's because just personally, this has been a struggle for me. My default mode has always been blame. And I've come a long way with it, but I totally understand the pull to do it and have firsthand experience with the damage that it causes and how hard it can be to actually stop doing it. Even when you know, like, this is not helpful, I need to stop doing this. Finding the alternatives and then being able to actually live them is a really hard thing to do, especially if you grew up in a family where that was just what people did. So I'm really excited to talk with you guys today about this topic. I know you have a lot of experience with this yourself as well, both personally and with clients. And why I love this topic so much is that obviously this is something that we see so often in working with couples. One of the biggest problems that people have is that they're not hearing each other because they feel blamed and they feel not heard or seen or accepted. Things don't feel safe. And blame links with all kinds of things that we see, like boundaryless problems. We see defensiveness coming up. It's really connected to so many things. So we're not even going to be able to tackle everything, that blame encompasses today, but we're going to do our best to really break this down in a comprehensive way. So just to help you guys identify like what it really is, why we do it, get some insight around that and how it shows up, because it shows up in really sneaky ways too, not just in the most obvious ways. Right. What you guys can do about it instead, and just some, tips around the inner work that's required in breaking out of this pattern. And this is good for you, whether you're the one who tends to blame or if you have a spouse that tends to blame. So if you're with us today, go ahead and just drop a comment. Let us know you're here. Let us know where you're from. And throughout, if you have any questions, we will try to answer them, especially if we can't get to them in the middle, we'll definitely try to answer them at the end. So welcome, everyone. And I want to start with just talking about what is blame, essentially. What is the definition of blame? And I really love Brene Brown's work and how she describes this. And how she defines blame is it's basically taking negative energy that we have inside of us and expelling it out of ourselves by blaming somebody else. If we point the finger, if we attack someone else, it's really because we feel bad inside, and that's just the easier way to like get it out. It's kind of a primal response. It doesn't really work. It might maybe work a little bit in the sense that you might feel temporary relief and feel like it's not my fault. And so therefore, how bad you feel might be lessened because you think it's not your fault and now you're blaming somebody else. Right. But that relief is very short-lived because it's damaging your relationships. But essentially, by recognizing that it's this desire to feel better that's underneath blame, we can reframe it as we can have compassion for ourselves and look inward and say, why do I feel so bad? What is bothering me so much? And how can I feel better without blaming? Because a lot of us, we feel guilty around it. It's like, oh, I shouldn't have said that, and it doesn't make you a horrible person. It just means that there's some kind of pain there and that needs to be looked at. So if we really reframe blame as an opportunity to look inward and say, what's really going on? This is an opportunity to shine the light and get some insight and awareness that can be communicated in a different way. We can actually get closer to our spouse. So in your experience, you guys, how would you say you see blame showing up the most? Because I think when we talk about blame, obviously we know that yelling at someone or, accusing somebody of something or making new statements and saying mean things to somebody, that's obvious. That's a very obvious way of blaming, right? Yeah. But it can come up other ways as well. What do you guys see, the most that you would want to flag in your work with relationships?
Well, I mean, for me, what I see oftentimes is people kind of bring a set of mores, culturally, to their relationship. And what I mean by that is we're oftentimes set up so that we often look outside of ourselves for, answers to problems. Yeah. We never, we're not taught to kind of start within first before we are able to actually understand what's going on and why we're in the midst of a problem. So the first thing we often do is just kind of look outside of ourselves and say, why is this happening to me? And who's created this situation for me and this environment? And, we're often forgetting the biggest factor, which is usually us. Okay. And oftentimes that's what we bring into a marriage. That's the first thing we bring into a marriage. So this is the way I see it and hear it oftentimes is, the wives, the spouses oftentimes will want to have a conversation with their husbands. And, they may not always start off properly. And oftentimes a husband can feel attacked. And immediately he feels like he's put on the defense. In the first place, he goes, hey, this is your fault. We get, whether it be finance, something about the kids, whether it be something at work that happened. That's often the first thing I see. I used to do this. I mean, I've had when Kelly and I were early on in the marriage, I'm at fault for doing that too. Also, it's very easy to look outside of yourself, and it's very super huge default mode to go, hey, this is your fault. I wouldn't even be here if this wasn't for you.
Right.
So that's that's oftentimes how I hear it.
Yeah. So it's really a pattern of thinking.
Yeah, definitely.
Looking for power outside of yourself, and it can show up in all kinds of ways. Well, and I guess, Kelly, you had a definition of like what blame really is that kind of links really well with what you're saying, Ned. It's just, this idea, this projection, right?
Right. Yeah.
More about that, Kelly, because I think that's such an important distinction. It's not so much about the behavior, but it's about the pattern of what your intentions are.
Well, to stack on what both of you have said already, and like, babe, what you just said is essentially, it's easier to blame. It's easier to blame someone else than to do the inner work that's required to really start to own your shit, your situation, and your circumstances. And really, when you're playing the blame game, it's because you're not doing the inner work.
Right.
Inner work, and you're not looking at yourself. And instead of really beginning the inner work and the inner transformation, you point your finger outside yourself, like what you just said, babe, for the reasons for why your marriage feels yucky and you're in a bad deal, a bad situation. And Gandhi's the one who said that you have to be the change that you want to see in the world. And I think that so many people want their partners to show up as these like skillful, conscious, aware, relational lovers. But they have not done any work to embody that inside of themselves. So what you want from your partner, what you want to receive from your partner, you have to really embody that. You have to do the work, the inside out transformational work, in order to be able to own your situation, your circumstances. So it's just what I see blame game as is just this huge red flag that, you aren't doing the inner work.
Yeah.
If this is a persistent, chronic problem for you or your spouse that you're blaming, if you're not growing at all and you're both staying stuck in these holding patterns of blaming one another, you haven't done the work,
Right. So it's really a mindset, because if you're blaming a lot, which essentially is a symptom of something deeper, which is the tendency to look outside and to control your environment so that you can get what you want more of through the outer world. And blame is a symptom of that.
Yeah.
It's not coming the way you want to see it in your outer world and through your relationships. Like you said, Kelly, if your spouse isn't showing up as that like super attuned, conscious, holding space, all the ways that they might fall short, we can move into holding them responsible for our experiences. That's the first mode of response. It's really a very disempowered way of thinking. We're trying to feel better within ourselves by controlling the people around us. Not overtly, we're not thinking that consciously, but it comes from that idea that, I'm focusing on this out here. I'm criticizing and I'm blaming it because I want to fix it, because then everything will be better if that could be fixed. So it's just a way of thinking that's disempowered, that has an external locus of control. And anytime you have an external locus of control, you are at higher risk of actually blaming and then even moving into abusive behaviors.
Yeah, definitely.
When you think about abusing a child, you're giving that child the power it doesn't have. You're giving it power it does not have. You're holding it responsible to do something it cannot do, and then you're punishing it. And it becomes abusive. You can't do that unless you're attributing power that isn't there. And when we blame, that's what we're doing on a milder level. And now, not all blame is abuse, but it's all, I would say all blame is destructive. None of it is constructive. No. And I would go so far as to say you should commit to a zero blame diet. Zero blame
policy in the relationship.
And have zero tolerance on it.
We've seen partners literally working with people where one partner is making their bad choices their partner's fault. It's that person's fault because this that I did this bad behavior.
That's another way it goes out.
Just like utter projection, I see that. We see that all the time. And that's really something to pay attention to, because
no, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, if you or your partner do that often, there's a big problem. Yeah. There's a really big problem. People at that level need to get help. Kind of problem.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that even when it's not projection, even when there's something real that you're noticing, this isn't right, there's still a way to communicate with our spouse if we're having a problem with something, because we've talked about, hey, you got to be willing to rock the boat in the relationship. You got to be willing to be bold. You got to be willing to speak your truth. So the question then is, well, how do I do that without blaming? And I know that this was a real question for me early in my marriage of if I'm not going to just be quiet and accept things that I don't like, if I'm going to, speak up and speak my truth and want to be communicating in a healthy, authentic way, how do I do that without blaming?
Right.
Well, I literally didn't know how to do that, because eventually I'm going to be talking to my spouse about them. How do I navigate that? Well, there are tools and techniques, but it's deeper than that. It's actually first looking at when I'm blaming somebody else, what does that mean about what I need? What does it mean about what I haven't been asking for? What does it mean about is there something, what part am I playing? You want to start there. It doesn't mean though, because what I'm trying to say, because Kelly, you were saying, a lot of times it's so much projection. We see this. We see total, almost delusional projection sometimes. But I want to also say that sometimes it's not projection. Sometimes it's real things in the marriage that you want to address. Right. And you're left wondering, how can I do this without blame? And it is possible. You just have to be willing to do it from a place of sharing about you. And we'll talk about that later when we talk about what to do instead. But I did want to highlight that blame doesn't mean that you're always 100% projecting, but you should definitely consider that might be going on. Always consider, could I be projecting here? Is there something that I'm seeing in them that is a disowned part of myself that I have rejected, that I don't want to see in myself, but I can easily see in them?
Yeah.
I want to start there. But you also, even if that's not the case, you still don't have the right to blame. Even if there's something real that your spouse is doing that you want to correct, there's ways to communicate that are not blaming.
Yeah.
Right.
And
I just have to make that distinction.
It's so important to guys and gals really get introspective too. When there is a problem that you want to address in the marriage and you really see this in your partner and it's really bothersome and it's sometimes triggering, your partner is your mirror, right? And a lot of people don't get what that means. And it's your partner is your mirror. That's what that means. If there's something your partner is doing that's bothering you to the extent that you're getting so triggered internally, it's because you have it in you. You would not resonate with something and notice something if, to a certain extent, it was not inside of you. So I'm not saying there aren't abusive behavior, all those things. What I'm saying is there's this nuanced approach that you really want to take if you really want to get more advanced with your own self-awareness and your own side of the street, like Monika has always taught. You really need to, when in those moments that you are pissed, right, or you're blaming, or there, you know, there's something that you even want to talk about, like that's what we were talking about just now, is when you want to bring it up, when something is bothering you, you want to fix it. You've got to go inward and figure out, is there anything in me? What is in me? Why am I seeing this in my partner? Why is this bothering me so much? And really get self-aware as to, is this something that you're projecting? Is this something that's really in me that I am projecting? Or am I seeing this in my partner and I don't like it? And it's also in me too, to a certain extent.
Yeah.
It's really important to just become aware of things.
Absolutely. And to ask yourself the question, am I bothered by this because it feels familiar? Am I particularly sensitive to this because of something else in my life that I came to this relationship with that's about more than just my spouse?
Yeah.
Right.
That's important to know too. I agree with you 100%, Kelly. You always want to start with that piece of it. Then once you have that clarity, maybe there's a request you'd like to make. Maybe there's a standards you want to hold. Maybe you don't like the way your spouse is talking to your kids and you want to raise the bar and you want to speak up about it. First, look inward and go, what does this mean to me? Why is this important to me? What are my life dreams? And then speak from that place and invite your spouse into that and make a request. That is a more empowered way of making the changes that you're seeking rather than finger pointing and blaming.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
I think that criticism is the big way that blame shows up. Obviously, criticism is essentially, I kind of want to break down how this shows up, and please just chime in, you guys, as you hear things. But criticism is when you're noticing something in your spouse and you're linking it to their character and you're globalizing. See, there you go again. You always do this. You're the kind of person who, you know, when you point something out and link it to a characterological defect, like they're too lazy or they're selfish or whatever, that's criticism. That's a specific kind of blame. Then there's accusations, which is like, you did this wrong, or why did you do that? When you ask questions where you might, well, I'm just wondering why you did it that way. And you might even bring it up like it's a neutral observation, but if you're repeatedly doing it and you're doing it because you know they did it wrong and you want them to explain themselves to you, that also feels subtly like blame and people get defensive. That's a very insidious way that blame can come in too. Like those neutral observations, like you're framing it like, well, I was just wondering. I was just asking a question. Gee, right. Defensive, but you know, on some level that was a pointed question and it was requiring an explanation. Why are they having to explain themselves to you? You know what I mean? That's something I used to do a lot.
Oh, go ahead, Ray.
No, go ahead. Right.
No, you go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's a very familiar dance because, and the reason being, the person, again, when someone's talking to you like that, and this is why it's so important to have the proper skill set to communicate effectively when you feel a certain way, to get that response that you need from the other person, is that person will easily be on the defense. Okay, we're just it's an automatic default mode that we go into, that we have to protect ourselves from, being bombarded by what they feel like is an attack. And that's essentially what it's always going to be. The first thing they do is go, why are you treating me this way? I used to get that way with Kelly sometimes when early on, when she would have a legitimate argument and I would either be in the mind space of going, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to hear it. I knew deep down it was my it was really me. It was my fault. And I would get to a point because she was really pushed the point, and I would just make it about something else. I would just change the subject, just like you said. I would just make it about something financial or something, and it had nothing to do. We might be talking about sex, you know, and she would. It would be very frustrating for her because she would. Early on, it was almost at a point where she would almost bite the bait sometimes. Okay. And she'd fall for it. But you know, over time you begin to realize, you know, she's really smart. So she's really smart. She began to catch on, and then she kind of hold me in my space. But it took some time for me to actually get to the place where I was just like, you know what, I'm going to, you know, listen to you, and I'm going to see where I can actually do better. But it's ingrained, and I mean, these are deep patterns, and it takes some time, and it's very hard to kind of come out of them. It's really difficult.
It is. I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think the defensiveness is one of the biggest reasons why we say no blame, because that you will be triggering your partner's defenses.
Yeah.
We are wired that way. Now, we also have to work on defensiveness. Like, we have to own that too and say, I want to commit to not being defensive.
Right.
But it starts with stopping blame. That's kind of how I see it. First, you want to stop blaming. Then if people are still getting defensive, then you got to look at, all right, why are you still getting defensive when there's not there's no attack here? But we want to protect ourselves from a negative view of us from our partners. Like, we feel attacked if we think they view us in a certain negative light. That feels unsafe. That feels like an attack on some primal level, right? Where we're going to be like, no, you can't. Don't look at it like that. That I'm not that terrible person that you think I am. And that might not be what they're saying at all.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It might not be about you as a person at all. It just might be a request that we hear as like, oh, I did something wrong. But the defensiveness piece is so important. And I think that's why it's so damaging. The reason why blame is so damaging is that it triggers defensiveness. It puts walls up, and it just goes south every time. Like, there's no way to get that emotional connection that you need to have before you communicate successfully and actually problem solve, because the walls are up.
Yeah.
You also hurt people. You cause irreparable damage when you continue to like talk about them in a negative light through blame and characterize them in a certain way. That hurts. Like, there's damage that comes from that takes so much more to heal than it would to actually just prevent in the first place.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and the other part, that when you begin to hurt a person like that consistently, it really begins to affect that person's trust with you around the relationship, because
it really erodes safety for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Because if you're feeling like this, and this is the only way that it's coming out, okay, you know, in this negative manner, and these are thoughts that I feel like you're hiding or holding in. What else are you holding in? What else are you not telling me? Mm-hmm. So like you said, it begins to erode the trust between us, and that's that's a huge no. And you're definitely getting ready to start a downward spiral.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So what to do instead? I mean, first you have to notice you're doing it, right? You have to notice, oh, I guess that question was sort of blaming, or obviously if you're overtly criticizing, you know that you're doing it. And if you're still listening to this right now, it is something that's probably touched your life, and you do know that it's there and you're doing it.
And you have to be aware if it's happening to you, if it's coming at you, if you're the one who's being blamed. Exactly,
because you don't have to accept blame. You can say that. There's such a good point, Kelly. There's a difference between getting feedback and getting blame. Yeah. So if you can be open to feedback, and if you're getting overly blamed and criticized, you can say hey, listen, I'm open to your feedback, but I don't want to engage in criticism and blame. That's not going to work for me. So let's find a different way of communicating that if you've got some concerns. And that feedback and requests are very different. So that it's important to know the difference on that. Definitely. But I think that people that tend to blame are in pain, like I said at the beginning. You got to look, because before you hurt your spouse by blaming, and a lot of times this comes from righteous rage. It's like, you're hurt, so you feel justified in hurting them. You have to look and say, all right, what pain am I in first? And how can I express that in a more vulnerable way?
Right.
Rather than just hurting back because I feel justified in doing that. because, you know, two hurts don't make it better. It
No.
only makes it worse.
No.
So the first step is to go, when I lash out, or when I go right to blame, or when I get really critical, what's at stake for me? Where is my pain point? What am I hurt by? What do I need to ask for? What do I need from my spouse? Do I need them to just understand something about how I'm feeling? Do I need, what do I need? You know, that's really what you have to look at. So on a general level, what healthy communication is sharing. And sharing is talking about ourselves and sharing microscopically what we're experiencing.
Yeah.
I felt a constriction in my gut. I felt rage, you know, come up. I felt threatened. You know, sharing what you're feeling, but not talking to them about them. That's not communicating.
Right.
Communicating is sharing, and that's that boundary. You know, what constitutes good communication is really that line between me and you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do you stop blaming is to say, I will from now on only communicate what I'm experiencing, what I'm feeling. I'm going to own my interpretations. I'm not going to talk to them about them. If you can do that, you'll be like making a huge stride towards stopping blame. Yeah,
I know for me personally, and it probably for most guys, again, I always talk about this, the emotional disconnect, you know, that, you know, we just have with ourselves first and foremost, which creates the wall, you know, that could really help us build that bond of trust with our partner a lot of times. Because of that, we have a really hard time, you know, connecting in that way because of our, you know, we're you know, we want to be stern, we want to be hard, you know, we want to be this masculine man. So we don't ever want to connect in that way. It makes us feel, you know, like a girl, you know, and we're often, you know, feminized for that, you know. So I know for me, but that used to be that way. But I can tell you the difference that I feel when I'm able to express myself 100%, and actually it's freeing to be able to own your side of the road, their side of the road, the middle of the road. It's freeing. Okay. It frees you up from that. And I know the anxiety that not just men, but people feel when they're in these spaces, because you're just stacking on top of something that you know is an issue within yourself, and you don't feel better. You know, going round and round and creating more havoc than it needs to be. I remember feeling that way, and it's a horrible place to be. So I encourage people, you know, to really listen to what we're talking about and take a stance for yourself and really go after learning how to identify when you are in these places, what it feels like, you know, I mean, what's going through your head, what's going through your body, where's it affecting you? Because that's how you know it's not a good feeling. Okay, first and foremost, it's not a good feeling. So, but I really encourage people to really gain the skills so that they can really understand and communicate effectively, especially the guys, because I know it's such a hard and arduous task for us to do that and come out of this, you know, this headspace where we feel like we have to be in control all the time.
Yeah, but what a relief to be able to move out of that.
Oh,
because
yeah, definitely.
all you have to do is know yourself. All you have to do is know what's on your side. What are you feeling? What interpretation are you giving something? And what do you need? Yeah. And if you can answer those 3 questions for yourself, which it's simple but not easy, but if you can simplify that process, you know, you're golden, like you're halfway there.
Yeah.
Now, then there's the shame that's in the way. Bad boundaries get in the way, triggers get in the way. But if you can commit to being able to answer those 3 questions for yourself, that's a really powerful way of ending blame.
Yeah,
totally. Definitely. And again, really not only owning your side of the street and you know your part, but really owning the entirety of your situation, because I hear from people every day and they're just like, you know, I'm in this situation in my marriage and it's really shitty, and you know, it's like, well, you're there, boo. So obviously you want to be there. Like there's a reason why you're in the situation, why you're in the circumstance. And when you can own the entirety of your circumstance, like you chose this person, you married this person, you did not have to marry this person, okay, but you did. So that's owning the entirety of the situation. I chose this, okay? So when you can take it a step further, beyond the surface, well, the medium level of owning your own stuff, when you take it that step deeper and you can own the entire situation and own responsibility there, it's very freeing. You take your power back then, and you go into deeper relationship with yourself, deeper relationship with your partner, because when you can say to your partner, literally, like, no, this is my doing.
Yeah.
I chose this.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm fucking here right now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. I love that, because it's so easy when we think my side of the street, their side of the street, and that boundary. It's easy to think 50-50.
Yeah.
Right. Get into that half-half mentality. But actually, you really want to, each person needs to take 100% and to really look at what part did I play in creating this? That should always be the question that you're asking yourself. What part did I play? Don't worry about if it's 2% or 90%. Just focus on what your part is and leverage and spend all of your energy on understanding it and fixing it, your part, the part that you actually have control over.
Yeah.
And I agree with you, Kelly, it is empowering. And what's interesting is, because it's so empowering, I always go back to this question of, it's so much better and more empowering. Why do we vie for the victim position? I've done it so many times in my marriage. It was like, no, you did me wrong. No, I'm the one that's hurt.
Yeah.
We vie for the victim position. Why do we do that when it's so much more powerful and better to move into 100% responsibility? Why is that?
Because it's easier to blame than it is to do the inner work.
Yes, I agree. I also feel like there's something else too, like it's almost like an unmet need. Like if I can get this person to, it almost feels like reparenting. Like on some level, we all want somebody else to just come in and fix everything for us. It's like a resistance to the full responsibility.
Right. It is.
Take full responsibility because then we don't feel us taken care of.
That goes back to the inner work again.
Yeah.
Right back to the inner work again.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned that, because Kelly and I were listening. Yeah, we were listening to a book earlier today, and I forgot I think his name is Robert Collier is the author, but I think it's called The Secret of the Ages, the book we were listening to, and he was talking about how oftentimes, because when we're raised, right, as children, and your parents are taking care of you dutifully, making sure that everything is okay and you're okay, and if they do you a huge disservice, and this is for many people, if they don't teach you how to take care of yourself, okay, beyond giving you the things that you need and the things that you want. So oftentimes, if this is the case, by the time you're 18 years old and you're getting out in life, what's your attitude? Unconsciously, you are probably thinking someone owes you something, or the world owes you something, or a person owes you something.
Or something to save you.
Yeah, just like you said, the reparenting. It's just like, okay, I'm looking for that person who can take care of me. If you have not been taught, look, you're going to have to do things for yourself, and you're not taught that at an early age. It's hard to remove those type of ingrained patterns that you've been raised. Someone's looking after you constantly. You get out on your own. And you call yourself creating your life. Once you get into a relationship, this is why I always talk about, Kelly makes such a strong point of going, it's so important to understand that your partner is your mirror for what you have going on inside. And oftentimes you will not know any of that unless you're in a relationship.
Right. You
will not know what types of problems, deep problems you have, personal problems you have until you're in a relationship.
Yeah.
And they're able to actually be reflected and see them. But unfortunately, because we're not even in the space and place of being able to deal with them, the issues once they are reflected to us, we're not even in the space that we can actually appreciate it, unfortunately. So it's so important, like you're saying, that we get the proper help and learn these skills. That, I just wanted to make that point. But it's it's a huge thing. It's terrible.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I see that sometimes I see couples too, where it's like they were taught to take care of themselves. But emotionally, they really never got a lot of empathy. They never really had anybody sort of tuning into them. And there was something emotionally missing. And then they want that, of course, they want that then from their spouse. And we all want that anyway. We want, obviously, compassion for ourselves. But they might want it to such a degree that you deserve as a child, but then you didn't get as a child. But now you're wanting that from your spouse. And you can't get that kind of same parent-child unconditional love in an adult relationship.
It's not healthy.
No.
It's not healthy because we're not in the romantic. I always go back. I love to bust the romantic myths. I'm sorry. This like thing that we've all been sold, hook, line, and sinker, that we, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
No.
It's not what this is about.
No, not at all. So it's really just grieving, saying, I have to grieve what I didn't get. I should have had it. I didn't get it. But I might not get it to that degree in my marriage. And so how do I handle the disappointment of that sometimes, and stepping up and grieving and really working through your stuff so that you're not playing that out in your adult relationship.
Yeah, definitely.
That's a really big part of it too. So that's why stopping blame, it starts with a simple intention. It starts with a clear line of like, I'm going to share about myself instead of focusing on you. But sometimes there is a fair amount of inner work involved, depending on your upbringing, depending on what kind of, if you had a trauma history or emotional neglect, it's a lot harder to do that.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
There's that sort of drive. You want to find the power outside of yourself.
Right.
And so it's really about tuning back in and saying, I've got the power. I don't have to get mad. I just have to get control of myself and understanding myself and what do I need and how to ask for it. And don't worry so much, though, about the journey. It starts with first committing to doing it differently and saying, I, from this moment forward, commit to a zero blame diet.
Yeah.
I'm not going to have that be part of my dynamic anymore.
Yeah.
When you stop doing that, when you hold yourself to that standard and you like bite your tongue when you're about to say something that you want to say, you will become more self-aware. You will start to know what's inside of you, because now you're not just expelling it. Now you're stopping yourself and you're sitting with it and you're looking for another way. That's when you learn what your boundaries truly are. That's when you really get that. So the process will emerge by just trying to stop it first. Then you will see what you need individually. What are the tools that are holding me back? Because it's different for everyone.
Right. Yeah, totally. Definitely. That's a very good point.
Today, I mean, that's the biggest thing that we could say to you guys is to make the decision. And if you're looking for help on that, if you feel like you want to get assistance personally and high support around how to do that for you, you can book a call with us at monikahoyt.com/talk. I'll put a link below this video if you want to. Also, if you have questions, you can post it below here. I don't see any questions right now that we can answer. Do you, Kelly?
No, but everyone post your questions that you have around this topic of the blame game, so we can answer them, because we love to answer your questions on these calls that we do. It gives us a lot of insight as to what you guys are wanting. So post your questions. And then also, if this video served you, make sure to like it and share it with your friends or your family who need to hear the message that they're not alone, because most people think that they're alone and having problems in their marriages, and you guys are in great company. So like it, share it with people, tag people who need to
tag someone.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ned and Kelly.
Thank you so much
for joining me. This was awesome, you guys. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. Have an awesome weekend.
Bye-bye.
Bye.